Jr. and the Civil Rights Movement. His company, Gene Kansas Commercial Real Estate, also engages in adaptive reuse, including a warehouse they're turning into a warehouse. Culturally, the firm also brings art exhibits, most recently, Equity in Architecture Constellations, along with jazz nights and murals to neighborhoods and communities, and hosts an article club called The Periodical, which is like a book club, which with less commitment. I want to thank Gene Kansas for doing this, and everyone, his staff, and everyone, please welcome tonight's speaker, Gene Kansas.
Hello, all. Thank you, David. That was great. I'm really happy to be here. It's a wild time in our world. Tonight's going to be a happy, hopefully compartmentalized, entertaining, hopefully educational departure. And we're going to be talking about one of my favorite topics, preservation. I am very appreciative to you, David, Ian, Michael, Rogers, Boyd Coons, and the whole Atlanta Preservation staff, and to you all who are here tonight, the preservation community in Atlanta. Happy to be here. So David gave a nice quick overview of who I am. Mentioned I'm from New Orleans. I grew up in this city where, fortunately, our parents exposed us to so much, to people swimming in bayous with alligators, to farmers, to Grammy Award-winning musicians, and New Orleans Police Department officers, and folks on the street, and just like the gumbo that is New Orleans. And I did not take that for granted. I've said before, though, I also didn't quite realize the gravity of that type of exposure in that type of place, and the history and the culture of it, because it was so normal. It just didn't dawn on me until I left how rich the history of New Orleans is, how deep the musical roots go, how not everyone is eating Tabasco with every meal and things like that. So I went to the University of Arizona, as David mentioned, have a degree in entrepreneurship, came to Atlanta in 1995, wanted to be here for the Olympics, kind of the world was coming here, and started my career as a writer, as a content developer for TNT specifically, and then got into feature and freelance writing, and really started to explore the city that way, still of New Orleans though. I didn't think about myself as a preservationist, even though I was still paying attention to the things that I think really truly define preservation in cultural terms, which are the people and the history and the culture surrounding. So I went on, did a lot more writing, eventually found my way into real estate, and today still do what I call, writing and storytelling, and just do it through a medium of the built environment. About 10 years after I moved here, Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans. And I can tell you that was shocking, it was devastating, and it was tragic. And there were the loss of lives, which obviously was the primary concern. And then this loss of a city. We're all experiencing this now. We've all lost something, and it's a quote unquote normal. There are folks who are sick out there, and folks who are dying, which is terrible. There are people who've lost jobs. That is as much about preservation as an old building. And when I saw my city underwater and my home, kind of fully destroyed, the city of New Orleans being home, I really started to understand what preservation is. It's that ability to walk out of your door, which we're all really understanding right now, and say hello to the barista at your favorite coffee shop, to go and get your hair cut, to welcome the mailman without wearing a mask on, those types of things. And that moment after Katrina is when I started to say, you know what, we're really getting into historic preservation because it's important. And so as a firm, Gene Kansas Commercial Real Estate, we do historic preservation. We also do adaptive reuse. We do brokerage, helping people buy, sell, and lease around Atlanta. And what you're seeing right now is a picture of Constellations, where we're broadcasting from tonight. This is a development project of ours. It's also a civic, socially, and culturally based shared workspace that is on Auburn Avenue in Sweet Auburn, birthplace of Dr. Martin Luther King and the Civil Rights Movement. And this is an example of some of our work. We also do a lot of programming. So when David mentioned cultural development, yes, it is like the development of buildings. It's also the development of programming, because that culture is vital. And, I would go as far as to say, as important as buildings are, they're somewhat irrelevant without people and the things that we do in them. This is a picture of Gary Pomerantz, who wrote Where Peachtree Meets Sweet Auburn. We had an author talk with Gary. We did an espresso exhibit tour at MODA, Museum of Design, Atlanta. There's me drinking like my 90th espresso. I think my wife is watching. Hello. She's there on the right at MODA. We host jazz nights. We bring murals to neighborhoods. So it's not just it's not just the development or cultural development of properties, which is what we do in part. It's also this development of like the public humanities. So I mentioned history, I mentioned culture, I mentioned community. We're all humans. And right now with coronavirus, we're seeing this, I think, hopeful silver lining toward global solidarity. We're all in it together. So if you think about culture are the things that we do. And history happens when we do them. And community is what's built when we do them together. So tonight, we are making history, and we're doing it together and strengthening a preservation community. So let's talk about preservation. It has three necessary components, and they really kind of define the word itself: conservation, protection, and care. These are the different segments of the presentation tonight. And so we will go through and define each of those and have a Q&A at the end of each of these. So believe it or not, that's the end of our first segment. Let me take a breather and see if there's any questions out there. Does anyone have a question? If you do, type it into the chat box. If not, we will keep on rocking and rolling. All right, so again, we're here to define preservation, and we'll start with conservation. Conservation is defined as preventing the wasteful use of a resource. And so to tell that story through historic preservation, we'll talk about the Atlanta Daily World Building, one of our projects. The Daily World Building was built in 1912. It gets its namesake from the Atlanta Daily World newspaper, the oldest continuously operating African-American daily in US history. It's a historic site in journalism. This was this neighborhood that gave birth to the Civil Rights Movement. And in this building on Auburn Avenue is where the leaders of the Civil Rights Movement came to express their freedom of speech. And not only that, to plan and debate. You have to remember, these were the parent generation and the student movement. And parents, and there's probably quite a few out there tonight watching this. I am one. I don't think my 5-year-old is watching this, but parents want to protect their children, and they want to keep them safe, out of harm's way. It's a different type of conservation, really, when you think about it. And at the Daily World Building and during the Civil Rights Movement, the parent generation did not want the students to get arrested because they were afraid that they would, be in harm's way with arrest records being used against them. All of this was happening at the Daily World building. There were other notable occupants of this building. I mentioned it was built in 1912. In 1918, it was home to Virgil Coffee Company. In the 40s, 1944 to be exact, Club Ponciana opened here. So great jazz joint from all that I've read. Benny Goodman, Billie Holiday, Louis Armstrong all made appearances here. And they were there for 10 years. And at the same time, in this kind of early to mid 40s, District 5 was in the building. And District 5 is Atlanta's first African-American Girl Scouts troop. So this building had a great resource and had a historical concern to it. And we're talking about conservation, so you want to protect, you don't want to waste a resource. Well, Mother Nature doesn't care about our resources that we hold, dear to us. And on March 14th of 2008, many of you may remember this, a tornado ripped through downtown Atlanta, six-mile path of destruction, and ripped the roof off of the Daily World building. It also ripped the roof off of the building where Constellations is. But at the Daily World, they didn't have money to replace the roof, and the insurance money wasn't coming in. And so for the next 4 months, it sat open to the elements. This is a picture of that path of destruction from the tornado. This is, the Daily World, somewhat in shambles. For the next 4 years, this building sat vacant. And for any of you that have ever just left the house, to go on some vacation for a couple of weeks, you come back, there's problems, cobwebs, there was a leak, or, you forgot to throw out some trash or something like that. Well, imagine leaving a building that had been open to the elements for 4 months, vacant for 4 years. That's what happened. And in 2012, a developer applied for a demo permit to buy it, to tear it down. Well, the place was in shambles. It looked a mess. There were thousands and thousands of empty heroin baggies on the floor, and rotten wood and black mold. And when I walked in there for the first time, I couldn't believe it, but it was beautiful in that its history was still there. That the paper had been there, that District 5, this is a picture of some of those original scouts, was there. That it's in, the same neighborhood that Martin Luther King was born, and Dr. King spent time in the building with the Scott family who founded the paper and the editors of the paper, talking about the movement with now Congressman Lewis and others. And so I just thought it was beautiful. Well, that didn't stop the developer from wanting to tear down the building. And what did end up stopping that, though, was community will. And groups like the Atlanta Preservation Center and others in and around the Sweet Auburn area and Atlanta at large banded together, and 1,100 people signed a petition to deny the demo permit. So that's a community will. And then the Atlanta Urban Design Commission came together and unanimously decided to deny the demo permit as well. So basically, community will and political will made sure that this building didn't quite literally go down in history. We happened to be in a leadership position. We took note of the efforts of the preservation community at this time. And we said, there's true value in the conservation of this history, of this culture. And we happened to be in a position where we could do a historic rehabilitation, and we were able to do that successfully, especially with the historic tax credit. So that is kind of a quick overview. Getting back for a second to some of the stuff that we do as a firm now, the Daily World, oh, this is cute. These are some of the original scouts who came to our grand opening. That was an amazing day. Now that the Daily World building is complete, we can have programming here. So one of the programs that we do is a program called Keeping Time, which is a jazz night that Proper, who's actually a tenant at Constellations, created, and we're happy to support. All of our programming is free and open to the public, and we'll talk about that in just a little bit. But now that we're at the end of our second segment about conservation, I want to see if there are any questions in the chat. Terry Kearns, I know you're out there, so feel free to lob in a question. Mom, you may be out there. Okay, so this is a question. God, now there are a lot. This is fun. So one of the questions is, how did you purchase the building? That's a really good question. So as you can see, the building didn't look great when we walked in. What looks like this blue string hanging from the ceiling is actually shredded blue tarp. It's really hard to keep rain out of a building when the tarp is shredded like that. And we, a partner and myself, from New Orleans, a guy named Ben Dupuy, a lifelong best friend who's also a preservationist, and has lobbied a lot for the historic tax credit, namely leading the effort to get the tax credit in the state of Texas, expand it in Louisiana, Georgia, South Carolina. Ben and I came together, and we decided that we could do historic tax credit financing, but we also had to do a conventional loan. And so we had our lender come out, and he said, Gene, we can do this, but it's going to require a whole lot more equity than you're used to. And I was like, well, why is that? And he goes, well, with all due respect, it looks like if a strong wind came along, this building would blow over. And I said, well, with all due respect, a strong wind did come along. It's called a tornado, and the building's standing here. And he laughed, and we were able to get it done. So good question and a fun story. Remember, preservation is about conservation, protection, and care. So this next segment is about protection, defined as the action of protecting. And we're going to tell this through constellations. Here's a picture of our North Star Library. You can protect a lot of things, right? So you can protect your plants during the winter. You can protect, witnesses from the mob. You can protect yourself right now through social distancing. Related to cultural development and creating this culturally based shared workspace, we thought about having this interest in protecting both the idea and the ideal of equality. So behind me on the wall, I'll move for a second, you can see our logo and the motto, Sol Omnibus Lucet, the sun shines upon us all. That means, equality in opportunity, in freedom of choice, in the ability to share a voice. One of the things about Constellations as a building, which was built in 1910 by Neil Reed as the architect, is that it really is this place of knowledge and enlightenment and the sharing of it. It was built as a school book warehouse. And so we're gonna quickly jump over to our North Star Library and welcome Jasmine Salazar. Hey, Jasmine, who's our community coordinator, joining from the library to talk for a moment about that.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Jean. I'm very excited to be here. So I am Jasmine Salazar. I am the community coordinator at Constellations. And what that means is I make sure that everyone who's in the community is happy, healthy, and thriving, and connecting and engaging with one another. So I'm actually in our North Star Library. It is a civil and human rights themed library. It was curated by a very close friend of ours named Jamie Allen, who's actually on this call. Hi, Jamie.
Hi, Jamie.
How are you? That was a lot of fun.
Nice. Where are you?
Can you see me? I see me. I'm right here.
I see you, Jamie.
Yeah.
So Jamie's on here, and he's one of the really cool people who are just in the space on a regular basis. And he helped curate our library where we have books about history, architecture, classic literature, and a few new books featuring this book by Stacey Abrams called Minority Leader. And it's actually signed because Stacey Abrams recorded a video shoot in this library last year. So that's just one of the other cool people that you'll see at the space.
Hey, can I say one thing too?
Yeah.
About it? We're actually, so this is the first iteration of a library, and it has a lot of like Southern literature, Southern history and that kind of thing. And then it sort of branches out to aspirational and inspirational things. But we're going to put it through a second iteration for when everybody returns. And we're going to update the shelves with books that focus on human and universal truths. So Gene and I are working on that right now, and we're excited about the next iteration of this library.
Yeah, no, thanks for letting folks know about that, Jamie. Jamie also, in addition to being a friend, a collaborator, and here since even before day one, is the founder and creator of the Squirrel Census, and successfully counted all the squirrels in Central Park.
Every single one. Yeah.
Amazing.
And we actually, one of the map, the squirrel map that we created, it's 5 feet long and 3 feet wide. It's actually hanging in the library, so you can actually go there and there it is right there. You take a close look, there's over 3,000 squirrel sightings on that map. And they're all categorized by our cartographer, Nat Slaughter, by fur color and behavior and activities and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah.
Constellations is a great place to be. Again, we're talking about protection. We're talking about equality. When we set out to start really thinking about what all that meant, we knew that we wanted to make a difference in the world here. Conceptually, you understand what Constellations is. These stars coming together to shine. You're seeing two of them on your screen right now. And when stars come together, they create pictures, and pictures tell stories. Like, we got all that, and we kept saying, yeah, we're going to make a difference in the world, but we really didn't fully understand what that meant. And then it dawned on us that the way that we can make a difference in the world is support what others are doing, their goals, their dreams, their missions. Tonight is, I think, an example of that. We support Atlanta Preservation Center. That is what Constellations does. It's a platform. It's what our roles are as leaders here, is to support. And when it really became obvious of just how real of a difference we could make, that moment came to us when we realized that, if you're going to support people's goals, missions, and dreams, there may be some people out there who you don't necessarily agree with. You still have to support them. And you do it with respect and courtesy and civil discourse. And when we realized that that could happen, especially with kind of the vitriol politically in the world, and going back when we started this 2 years ago, we knew that we were onto something. Because if we can do that here and, disagree and do it in a nice, courteous way and have a conversation, and that can spill outside of here, onto Auburn Avenue and through the Martin Luther King Historic District and through Atlanta and around the world, then we can really make a difference. And so that's what we think about as protection. Going to go to the Q&A for this part, just being courteous of everyone's time, and see if anyone has any questions about that segment, protection. Actually, Tara Dennis, who is part of a company called Archie Bolden, who is a member at Constellations, is joining us from Australia. She kind of got stuck there, not probably a terrible place to be stuck right now. Tara, do you want to chat a question our way?
I did. Yeah.
There you are. Hey.
Hi.
Any questions?
Yes.
You
Wait,
can-
did you unmuted me? Sorry, I wasn't sure. Yeah, I was just wanting to know, hello everybody, in relation to preservation, like what's the percentage of an interior and a built form that you have to retain, and how much can you replace? Because obviously I'm sure there would be covenants around what needs to be kept, but then obviously you can't keep everything if it's in a poor state.
Yes, great question. And so, you know, we like rules that are clear. And if you're going to get a historic tax credit, the rules are pretty clear. And there's some that can be subjective, but, you know, primarily, like, you do not go and change something that is historic to the building. And that could be, you know, one of the hot buttons windows. You don't, you know, just move walls because you feel like it. You don't take plaster off of brick because you think it's like an in vogue look. So at Constellations, and you can see behind me, these walls are brick. This, again, remember, was built as this book warehouse. And so it had this industrial use. We weren't able to get a historic tax credit for Constellations because of something called the basis test, which is really saying that you have to spend at least 50% in qualified rehabilitation expenses. So what you're going to be putting into the building to preserve it in a historic manner. You have to spend at least that much as your basis in the building. And interestingly, because the real estate market in Atlanta has been so over the top expensive, it's been hurting the ability to get a historic tax credit, in my opinion. So even though we couldn't spend as much to meet that basis test, we still did it to the letter of doing a historic rehabilitation, historic preservation. So we followed the rules in place by the Georgia State Historic Preservation Office, Department of Natural Resources, and the National Park Service. So there's quite a bit. And Tara, to brag on you for a moment, is a sincerely talented interior designer who also has started to express her talent in exterior. And we're fortunate to be working with you on a historic preservation that our firm is doing in Virginia Highland. We're also working on that with another Constellations star and member, Matt Finn, who may be on the call tonight. Matt, are you there? If Matt's on, that'd be really fun. Matt's a great architect, and he's the architect of Constellations. You know, anyway, great question, Thora. We're going to get to the next segment. Again, preservation, conservation, protection, and care. So for our care section, and care being defined as health, welfare, interest, concern about something or someone, we're going to do it as told through Refuge Coffee. And our surprise guest is none other than the founder of Refuge, Kitty Murray. Kitty, are you there?
I'm here. Hey, Jean.
How are you?
I'm great. I'm not too surprised. I'm not surprised that I'm here, but I'm glad to be a surprise.
That's funny. So Kitty, in addition to being a true leader, you know, I would say internationally, especially from the work that Refuge does, and I'll let you, share with everyone online tonight. You all are also our coffee partner here at Constellations, and a tie-in to that is that your coffee shop, Refuge Sweet Auburn, is in the Daily World building in the same space that Virgil Coffee was in 1918. So bringing those two things together, and because you are you, we wanted to have you talk about care. And so maybe can you give a minute about what Refuge Coffee is, and then I'd like to ask you a couple of questions from my own internal chat.
Sure. And I thank you. It's just like a really big honor to be invited into anything you do, Jean. So thanks. Yeah, Refuge is a nonprofit. We are a job training program at heart, but we express that mission of job training and providing jobs for resettled refugees and immigrants through coffee and hospitality. And we've been doing this for 5 years. We have now 2 shops, the one out here in Clarkston that we've converted successfully to a drive-through for the last 4 weeks. Downtown is a pickup spot. We have red coffee trucks that are really gorgeous, and we've been doing neighborhood drop-ins with those, and everybody who's invited us has had little neighborhood gatherings in cul-de-sacs and on streets, and everybody's very compliant with the 6 feet of social distancing, so it's worked really well, but it still gives people this kind of fun respite in their day that involves coffee. But so we employ and do job training. I would say at the heart of what we do is this idea of welcome, which really fits into care, almost as sort of the launch pad of what care should look like, I think, in a community. We are, sorry, I'm jumping all around, but our birthplace is Clarkston. Time magazine called Clarkston the most diverse square mile in the nation. There are about 65 languages spoken in this little 1.4 square mile that I'm sitting in the middle of right now because my husband and I live here. About 45 countries represented here. Over half of the population in Clarkston, which is around 13,000, are foreign born, and most of those are resettled refugees. So it's a really beautiful community of heroic survivors, and we employ a lot of those. So our payroll is 80% refugee run. Yeah.
It's so great. I never get tired of hearing your story. Interestingly, we started by talking a little bit about what our firm does in cultural development. And then, you hear terms like that thrown around. You hear constellations, stars coming together, and it's like, yeah, okay. Well, it is so cool that it actually works, though. So Jasmine, who you met earlier in the North Star Library, and Brooke Rashid, who is producing this call, thank you, Brooke, both work on our programming. Our programming at Constellations is all free, and to join our Happenings membership is free. So all open to the public, all free. Well, one of our cultural partners, Moda, was having the Art of Espresso exhibit that I showed a picture of earlier. And we decided, and Jasmine put together a periodical, our Articles Club that David mentioned at the top of this call, around the ability of design through the in-home espresso maker to liberate women in Italy in the 1950s. And we always try to have like a relevant guest. So we thought, we love Refuge. We don't really know them. We love their coffee. We think their truck's cool. Why don't we see if Kitty can come? And she did, and we became friends. And then later, when there became an opening at the Daily World building, we reached out and said, how would you like Kitty and Walt to bring Refuge to Sweet Auburn? And so that's another stars coming together. It's also kind of laying the groundwork for my question to you, Kitty, which is, how does being in Sweet Auburn extend Refuge Coffee's mission of care?
Well, first I have to say, I love stories that have that phrase in it. We became friends, and then later, like I kind of love that. This idea of welcoming people, you've really touched on it already. My husband and I were talking about it this afternoon, that I think if we care for a community, the first thing we have to do is know that the people in that community feel like they belong, that they feel welcomed, they feel like it really is kind of the Cheers, there needs to be a place where everybody knows your name, I just think that's a really important part of caring for a community. It's not the only part. And so I love that so much of your story centers around collaborating. Like, sometimes I laugh when I think about, like, at Refuge, we always talk about wanting to tell the world a more beautiful, accurate refugee story. And the way we do that is very subtle, but I think it's really powerful because our employees tell the story just by being themselves. So I think all we do is make coffee. I mean, it really isn't rocket science, but we are a part of the community in that we've created a place to drink that coffee and a way to get that coffee that tells a better story and that does good in the process. And again, you know, I don't know anything about healthcare. I wish I did right now, especially. I don't know anything about architecture. I kind of wish I knew more about that, although I don't know that I want to go to school again. There's a lot I don't know how to do, but, you know, I think gathering people and making them feel cared for and helping them to see that they don't have to prove that they're worth that, right? That they're just worth that because they're human. That I can do. Like, and I can make a latte. I've probably forgotten how to make a good one, but I know enough people who now know how to make good ones. So I think that it's a really simple thing that we do, but it really fits into this bigger picture that was already happening in Sweet Auburn in so many ways through preservation. And we're just here to make the coffee. And all our trucks say more than good coffee on them. So we're really committed to it being more than that. But yeah, I think this idea of all of us coming together and doing our part, and then doing our part with as much sparkle and as much intentionality and as we can. But if we're all doing that, then I think we care well for a community.
Yeah, no, well said. I mean, I think that right now, hopefully we're all seeing this, you know, again, kind of hopeful silver lining in global solidarity, in being able to wave to people as you go on a, you know, responsibly socially distant walk together with someone or what have you. When you go into Refuge Coffee, be it in Clarkston or up to a truck or in Sweet Auburn, you're going to get someone who is so happy to see you. We're all in the world going through, you know, this crisis right now in a global pandemic. These are folks who, you know, prior to coming and landing at Clarkston, prior to going through job training and leadership development at Refuge, were like, you know, literally being shot at in the streets. And they are so happy. And if they can be here and be happy, and they can show care, and care is shown to them, you can start to really see just how important preservation is, and that component of it. Especially when you think about preservation in terms of like the people and the history and culture surrounding buildings. Brings up my second question, Kitty. What does preservation mean to you and to the community you serve?
Gosh, you know, Brooke and I talked about this a little this afternoon, and I think preservation is, you know, I have always just thought of it in these really kind of dry terms, you know, like, well, it's the beauty of buildings and parks and, you know, but I really think what you pointed out is to create a culture and a space where the beauty of who people are can like, it can shine. So like what you said, that like our team, one of the things we're doing when we do Zoom calls like this, and we have to, you know, everybody's done this the last 4 weeks, right? You ideate some way to do everything differently because you can't do it the way you were doing it before. And then the news and everything changes and you have to reiterate it, and then you have to do it again. And so we're having to be more creative than ever, which is really fun. But I think one of the things we keep going back to is we still want to engage. Like we don't want to do this in this way that's just handing out information or services or, you know, we have this little food pantry that we've set up, but we wanted it to be pretty, and we wanted it to be accessible, and we wanted it to have all the languages on it, and we wanted it to have good food in it, and we wanted to get the word out to people in a way that would engage them. Or we were supposed to have a 5K next weekend, and we're going to do a virtual 5K, but we want to do it in a way that people feel like they're a part of it and it engages them. So I think preservation, to me, and maybe this is the ultra extrovert in me coming out, but preservation is you show up and you're a part of it. It isn't just, you know, you make things look better. It's it requires some level of engagement.
Absolutely. You know, yes, engagement, showing people that you actually care, which again, you know, is part of preservation, preservation of relationships. You know, we're investing a lot into relationships right now. You know, it's not the best time to go out and spend like all your money. It doesn't really take money to, you know, to invest in relationships. And we are doing some things here at Constellations, and our way of showing that we care, and also that we're, you know, part of this cultural conversation. We get it. Jasmine is leading, along with Matt Finn, who I mentioned earlier, a healthy redesign here. So when Tara, when you come back from Australia, come back soon, you know, you and others who are here, and folks who come to our programming, and folks in the neighborhood, and Ahmad and others who come to, you know, serve great coffee at Constellations will see, feel, smell, sense this care through this healthy redesign. Healthy in terms of fresh, bright, more plants, walking trails, fresh fruit. There was someone here today who was doing a deep clean with this thing that looked like a Buick with like a hose on it, and like just cleaning the upholstery. You have to do these things. And this is a time where, yes, we could all be sitting at home kind of doing nothing. But just because you may not be busy at work doesn't mean that you can't be busy doing something for work or for a neighbor. So Kitty, thanks for sharing that.
Well, one other thing I do want to add, a beauty of collaboration is that there's kind of this tag team effect, because I don't know about you, but my energy level, like my capacity it isn't gone, but it like has waves, you know, and I like it's an odd thing, but I feel like I'm not as creatively energetic. And I'd read that entrepreneurship is empathy plus creativity, you know, and I think, but sometimes these days it's all of that's getting sapped a lot more, but because we're collaborating with so many others, then when I just have to kind of sit and read a book and be quiet and not engage, there are a lot of other people on our team who are able to do it. And then I can kind of step in when they can't, or other people in the community. And I've really loved seeing that in our community here, and the little bit that I've been able to just observe what's happening downtown.
Well, thank you for teeing up the perfect question. How can we care for you?
Oh, I don't think I got that question ahead of time.
We have a few surprises of our own, Kitty.
Yeah. Well, you know, I think, I know, I'll give you a fun way.
Product placement.
You know, we have this virtual run we're going to do a week from Saturday, and we've already, you know, people have already signed up, and the registration's closed and all that. But we're actually doing, if this is your thing, we're doing a dance challenge. There's a drink, and Jean, it's your favorite drink. It's called the Shakerado. And we have a Shakerado dance challenge on social media, and it's super fun. So if you want to go look at that on our social media, it's Refuge Coffee Co. And we feel like the timing is just right. People need to be able to like get out there and do crazy things and dance or whatever. So it's just a really fun thing. So if that's your thing, go do that. We do have a tip jar campaign. It's on our website. Just so far, we have 21 employees. We have not laid anybody off. We've been able to keep everybody working and engaged, and that we're so grateful during this kind of time. So those are some ways to just invest or just come alongside. And the other thing is, if you live within 20 miles of Clarkston, not Sweet Auburn, but of Clarkston, you can text Ahmed. I don't even have his number on me, but you can get on our website and find it, and invite the truck to come to your neighborhood. And unlike our catering, where you would pay for our truck to come, you just invite us, get the word out to your neighbors, and people can come get coffee.
That's
So
amazing.
yeah.
Really great. Yeah, we'll share your dance party with our little galaxy. There you go, Jasmine. So yes, this has been great to have these, friends and stars of the Constellations community to bring together this full definition of preservation through conservation, protection, care. Kitty, you did an amazing job. On the screen right now is a picture of me and you hugging at the welcoming party we had. I love that. This is a little preview to the new Constellations website, which will be launching May 1st, May Day, the ancestral celebration of spring. Think happy, think healthy, think bright, think fresh. Our friend Jamie Allen, who is a writer and collaborator, has been pouring a lot of energy and effort and intellect and whimsy into this. So has Brooke Rashid, who's been leading it, and Office of Bros. It's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be about culture. It's going to be about preservation. And it's going to be about coming back together and doing so in a fun way, in a courteous way, in a cultural way. And we really look forward to seeing all of you here when we can, when the air clears. So, for now, signing off. Thanks again to the Preservation Center. Thanks to all of you. And we hope to see you again soon in person. Thank you. Bye, everyone.